Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Mахарадж ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming, despite of knowing that I'll be giving class. So we'll start this exciting topic by offering our glorifications to the spiritual masters, Vaishnavas, and the Supreme Lord. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyanandana Shalakaya Chakshurandalitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Dagati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There are a couple of interesting verses from the Madhya Leela of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chapter 19 is Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs Srila Rupa Goswami. So we'll read two texts, 156 and 157. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Yadi Vaishnava Parada Uttehati Mat Upadeva Chinditar Sukhiyayapad. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. If the devotee commits an offense at the feet of a Vaishnava while cultivating the creeper of devotional service in the material world, his offense is compared to a mad elephant that uproots the creeper and breaks it. In this way, the leaves of the creeper are dried up. One's devotional attitude increases in the association of a Vaishnava. Tandara charana seva bhakta saniva chanamidana mehai e abilas. By his personal example, Narottam Das Thakur stresses that the devotee must always remember to please his predecessor Acharya. The Goswamis are represented by one's spiritual master. One cannot be an Acharya, spiritual master, without following strictly in the disciplic succession of the Acharyas. One who is actually serious about advancing in devotional service should desire only to satisfy the previous Acharyas. Echai Gosayar Muitaradas. One should always think of oneself as the servant of the Acharyas, and thinking these one should live in the society of Vaishnavas. However, if one thinks that he has become very mature and can live separate from the association of Vaishnavas, and thus gives up all the regular principles due to offending a Vaishnava, one's position becomes very dangerous. Offenses against the holy name are explained in Adi Lila, chapter 8, verse 24. Giving up the regular principles and living according to one's whims is compared to a mad elephant, which by force uproots the Bhakti Lata and breaks it to pieces. In this way, the Bhakti Lata shrivels up. Such an offense is especially created when one disobeys the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called Guru Avagya. The devotee must therefore be very careful not to commit offenses against the spiritual master by disobeying his instructions. As soon as one is deviated from the instructions of the spiritual master, the uprooting of the Bhakti Lata begins and gradually all the leaves dry up. And we'll read next verse as well. Tatemali yatnakari kare avaram aparatha hastiryache nahaya udgam. The gardener must defend the creeper by fencing it all around so that the powerful elephant of offenses may not enter. Purport. While the Bhakti creeper is growing, the devotee must protect it by fencing it all around. The neophyte devotee must be protected by being surrounded by pure devotees. In this way, he will not give the maddened elephant a chance to uproot his Bhakti creeper. When one associates with non-devotees, the maddened elephant is set loose. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Asat Sangatyag, a Vaishanava char. The first business of a Vaishnava is to give up the company of non-devotees. A so-called mature devotee, however, commits a great offense by giving up the company of pure devotees. The human being is a social animal, and if one gives up the society of pure devotees, he must associate with non-devotees of satsanga. By contacting non-devotees and engaging in non-devotional activities, a so-called mature devotee will fall victim to the mad elephant offense. Whatever growth has taken place is quickly uprooted by such an offense. One should therefore be very careful to defend the creeper by fencing it in, that is, by following the regular principles and associating with pure devotees. Even if one thinks that there are many pseudo-devotees or non-devotees in this Krishna consciousness society, still one should stick to this society. If one thinks that the society's members are not pure devotees, one can keep direct company with the spiritual master, and if there is any doubt, one should consult the spiritual master. However, unless one follows the spiritual master's instructions concerning the regular principles in chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord, one cannot become a pure devotee. By one's mental concoctions, one falls down. By associating with non-devotees, one breaks the regular principles and is thereby lost. In the Upadeshamrita 2 of Srila Rupa Swami, it is said, Atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha laulyamcha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to attain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4. Practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5. Associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6. Being greedy for mundane achievements. Yadi Vaishanava Aparatha Uthehati Mata Upade Vachindetara Sukhiyarapad. If the devotee commits an offense at the feet of a Vaishnava while cultivating the creeper of devotional service in the material world, his offense is compared to a mad elephant that uproots the creeper and breaks it. In this way, the leaves of the creeper are dried up. The gardener must defend the creeper by fencing it all around so that the powerful elephant of offenses may not enter. Very interesting instructions that the development of devotional service is compared to a creeper, and we can see that, especially here in India, that when, for example, a creeper or a tree is very small, there is a fence around the plant, because what will happen if there will be no fence? Some animal will eat the plant up, right? And but the fence is protecting this plant. And so Prabhupada explains what is the fence we should put around our devotional creeper. That is sadhu sangha, association with devotees. And once we remove the fence, it becomes offense. So offense is when there is no fence. Off the fence, right? Offense. And in Sanskrit, offense is expressed with the word Aparatha. Aparatha is a very interesting word. We know who is Radha, Srimati Radharani. And apa means against. So aparatha means if we act against Radha, if we do what is not pleasing to Srimati Radharani. And this is the first and foremost offense, first and foremost activity which displeases Srimati Radharani, and that is offending Vaishnavas. And of course there are many different ways, as described in scriptures, how Vaishnavas can be offended. Garuda Purana gives a list of those offenses that the worst offense, of course, is to try to kill a Vaishnava or kill a Vaishnava. And there are examples of that in scriptures. Hiranyakashipu tried very hard to kill his Vaishnava son. Luckily he was unsuccessful. Luckily for Prahlad Maharaj. And next offense is physically assault Vaishnava. Then next offense is verbally abuse Vaishnava. Then talk ill about Vaishnava behind his or her back. And the last offense which is listed is not to feel happy upon seeing a Vaishnava. And then Garuda Purana says, anyone who commits any of the offenses above is going to hell. That's the conclusion. So we should make sure that we're always happy upon seeing Vaishnavas. This is how seriously the offenses against Vaishnavas are taken. Because Vaishnavas are very dear to the Lord. It's very interesting that the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is describing that, of course, all the living entities are very dear to the Lord, but the dearest of all the living entities amongst 8,400,000 species are human species of life. And then there are 400,000 different species of human life, and unfortunately most of them are not civilized, and there are very few civilized. And amongst the civilized, those who follow Varnashram Dharma, the most dear to the Lord are Brahmanas. That's why when we offer prayer to the Supreme Lord, we say Namo Brahmanya Devaya Brahmanaya Cha. The Lord is the well-wisher and protector of Brahmanas and cows. And the best of the Brahmanas are Vaishnavas. So we can understand that Vaishnavas are the dearmost persons for the Supreme Lord. And therefore, if we offend a Vaishnava, any Vaishnava, then we really displease the Lord. And that's why offending Vaishnavas creates horrible consequences. And Srila Prabhupada brings up very interesting point in the purport. He says that even if someone thinks that there are no real Vaishnavas in the Krishna consciousness movement, or there are pseudo Vaishnavas, and it's very interesting that Srila Prabhupada wrote these purports already in mid-70s, after having very good experience with Western devotees who have very interesting perceptions of Krishna consciousness, mostly, many times distorted through the lens of their perceptions, which are not exactly Krishna conscious perceptions, being born many times in the culture, so-called culture, Western culture. As Krishna Kshetra Maharaj joked last time, when Gandhi was asked, what do you think about Western culture? He said, it would be a good idea. So, being born in this situation, one will naturally lack culture. And the basis or the foundation of Vedic culture is respect and tolerance. That's why Lord Chaitanya stresses this verse, Trinadapi Sunichna Taror Eva Sahishnava Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. And we can see that those who were born in the culture, for example here, we are very fortunate. In Shadam Mayapur we see but many wonderful Vaishnavas who were born in Krishna consciousness and have culture. And you can see that they are very humble and have great service attitude. Quite amazing. Yesterday I saw in the evening before Gaur Arati, some pilgrims came and one little girl, she climbed up and went to Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasana, and the father was a little worried what she was going to do, because she was going straight to Srila Prabhupada. And, some devotees were also looking what she's doing. And then she came straight to Srila Prabhupada, put hand to her forehead, and then she folded her hands in offering pranam. And this girl was maybe 2 or 3 years old. And it was very impressive that at such a young age she already understands Vaishnava culture. So that's the advantage of taking birth in India, and especially in devotee families. So that's very special, and it gives a lot of advantage. Unfortunately, if someone is not born in such a situation, one will have certain, what do you call it, samskaras, vasanas. Vasanas means certain impressions from one's previous life, before Krishna consciousness, or maybe from many previous lives. And we understand that Western culture is not really the one of humility and service. It's exactly the opposite way. It's the culture of pride and competition, right? Everybody is competing with everybody else, and those who are on the top, they become very proud. And this influence, unfortunately, is not so easy to eradicate, and Srila Prabhupada have seen that in the development of Krishna consciousness in the West, that his disciples, they have these problems, being very competitive and being very critical. And pride means very simple thing, that if we talk about Vaishnavas, the only Vaishnava I can see is the one in the mirror. And I don't see any other Vaishnavas around. This kind of attitude, unfortunately, is not so rare. And that's why Mahabharata gives very interesting examples of two personalities, Duryodhana and Yudhishthira Maharaj. And both of them were given the task of traveling all over the world, and they were supposed to find a person. Duryodhana was supposed to find someone who is better than him, and Yudhishthira was supposed to find someone who is worse than him. And interestingly enough, both of them failed to accomplish their task. Duryodhana couldn't find anyone who is better than him, because he was thinking he is the best of all in the world, and Yudhishthira couldn't find anyone who is worse than him. So this is a very graphical example of two types of consciousness: pure Krishna consciousness and materialistic consciousness. Materialistic consciousness means I'm the best of all. There is no one better than me. And if such a person takes up to Krishna consciousness, then maybe he will think, okay, maybe my guru is also a devotee, right? And I'm also a devotee, but that's about it. And this is called Kanishta Adhikari, right? And even in reference to one's guru, such a person accepts the guru only up to the point when guru says something which one will not like, right? So even that acceptance of guru, unfortunately, is very shallow. And this is the kind of mentality which is very dangerous. And if this mentality is cultivated, and this mentality is oftentimes fed by the critical perception of others, seeing faults and shortcomings in those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, and then justifying one's words, thoughts, words, and actions by the perception that, okay, I cannot offend the devotees, but these people, even though they are wearing tilak and even though they are chanting Hare Krishna, but because they are not pure devotees, that's why I don't accept them as devotees, and that's why I can offend them. So this kind of black and white perception, right? If one is not pure devotee, then one is not a devotee at all. So this extremist kind of attitude, which propels the offenses, right? Idealistic attitude, and then one demands that everyone around me should be completely pure, right? And Srila Prabhupada faced that. One disciple came to him and he was complaining about some other disciple, about his own godbrother. And he was expecting Srila Prabhupada that he will take some action against that devotee he was complaining against. And Srila Prabhupada's response was, try to tolerate. But this devotee didn't like it. He said that Srila Prabhupada, I cannot tolerate this. And Srila Prabhupada said, still, try to tolerate. And then his question was, but how can I tolerate this devotee? And Srila Prabhupada said, please try to tolerate him exactly in the same way I am tolerating you. So this was a bit of a wake-up call. But this is the biggest difficulty, that as Jesus Christ says, that they see a little speck in somebody else's eye, but in their own eye they fail to see a huge log of wood. Right? And so, as we say that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, so we can understand that the opposite is also true. That whatever we see in other people, this is the reflection of our own consciousness. And that's why there are so many verses in scriptures which explain that the devotee is like a bee, and he or she is always searching for nectar, is always seeing the best in people, right? But the materialists are like flies, and so flies are going for something which is not nectar. And this is what Srimad Bhagavatam explains. For example, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we just happened to read and discuss chapter 18, and this is what text 7 is explaining about Maharaj Parikshit, that he was a devotee of the Lord, and that's why he was completely non-envious, to such an extent that he didn't even have any envy towards Kali, personality of all the faults in this age. Even towards Kali, he didn't have any envy, because he was a devotee who was like a bee, always searching for nectar. And we can understand that fault-finding, offenses and criticism, they sprout from one single but the worst of all the qualities, right? Which is envy, which is the quality which keeps us bound in this material world. And that's why it's so dangerous that if we try to cultivate our envy, we have no chances to advance spiritually. And that's why this is the very first offense against the holy name, to criticize and blaspheme devotee. Interestingly enough, Srila Prabhupada speaks about spiritual master in the purport, but it doesn't mean that spiritual master is the only person we suppose not to criticize. But he speaks about following spiritual master, and this is the main focus of the spiritual master, that he's trying to engage us in devotional service, which means we stay in the devotee association and serve Krishna together with other devotees and also serve Vaishnavas, which is the best antidote against criticism and fault-finding. And I think this is quite an interesting subject, because even though it is so elaborately discussed, anyone who have read Srila Prabhupada's books probably noticed that, for example, Srimad Bhagavatam, every single canto discusses this subject, with the only exception of the second canto, and the only reason why no stories of Vaishanava Aparatha are given in the second canto, because it's the shortest of all. It only has 10 chapters. So Maharaj Parikshit didn't have enough time to include some stories of Vaishanava Aparatha in the second canto. But otherwise, every other canto, with no exception, has at least one story, if not more, of Vaishnava Aparathas, and completely disastrous results of criticizing and offending and blaspheming Vaishnavas. And in my short 28, 29 years of practices, I've seen with my own eyes different disastrous consequences of offenses against Vaishnavas. And yet it's interesting to note that still some people, they never stop, right? Despite of all these evidences and warnings throughout Srila Prabhupada's books, and some people, they make it their occupation. They want to become professional critics of all the Vaishnavas. And interestingly enough, they do not just criticize some Vaishnavas nobody knows about, right? They go for the nectar. They want to criticize the most prominent devotees, the most known leaders of the society. And I think the reason is pretty clear, right? Who is interested if you criticize some Bhakta Jake no one heard of, right? But if you criticize very prominent leader, you become immediately the center of everybody's attention, right? And somehow some people, they want to make it their main occupation in life, seems like. And it's very interesting that they think that they will, I don't know what they think. Only they don't think. Like it says, don't worry too much about what people will think, because they don't do it very often. And that's why this topic is important, because we want to advance spiritually, and we want to get all the blessings of the Supreme Lord and His devotees, and we want to avoid anything which will displease them. So, there's a few words on the subject, but if anyone wants to add anything or ask questions, or if you have any suggestions or complaints, you're welcome to share. We have a microphone, maybe it will be easier. People are speaking microphone.
About this story of Yudhishthira Maharaj and Duryodhana. So I can totally understand Duryodhana. That he's so puffed up that he really couldn't find anyone. But for Yudhishthira Maharaj, I'm in general this idea that when you're very qualified, when you're very humble, I mean, of course, you're also very humble, but realistically speaking, you can always find, when you see realistic on other people, you can find people who are not so qualified it's difficult to understand this mood of Yudhishthira.
Yes. So how can we understand that? We can understand Duryodhana, but how Maharaj Yudhishthira couldn't find anyone who is worse than him. There is a story very similar that one spiritual master told his disciple that I can initiate you. Disciple wanted initiation. I can initiate you only if you find someone who is worse than you, who is like absolutely worse personality, right? And then first this disciple was thinking, oh, this is very easy task. And then he saw, he was educated and had many abilities, and then he saw some simple farmer and he was thinking, oh, I'm better than this man, so I can get initiated. But then he thought, am I actually better than him? Because he's living very simple life, he's very humble. Am I that simple and am I that humble? No, actually he's better than me. He surpasses me in his simplicity and humility. So no, and then he saw a child, he was thinking, oh, I'm better than this child. But then he thought, am I as innocent as this child? Not at all. So this child is better than me. And then he was, looking at other living entities, okay, this dog, I'm better than this dog, but am I better than this dog? Because this dog was born in a holy place and lives in a holy place the whole life, and probably will leave the body in the holy place. Do I have that fortune? No. So this dog is better than me. And then he was looking for someone, and then finally he found worm and stool, and he was thinking, oh, I think at least I'm better than this worm and stool. But am I actually better than this worm and stool? No, because this worm and stool has opportunity to advance evolutionary. And if I'm not careful, I can become worm and stool. So this worm stool's past can become my future. So I'm not even better than this worm and stool. So if we are realistic, and it's very interesting that in the verse which I referred to about Maharaj Parikshit, it's specifically mentioned that he was realist because he was a devotee of the Supreme Lord, and that's why he was so positive and never had any envy towards anyone. So if someone is realistically perceiving everyone, then one will see that there is not a single living entity which I excel in every single respect. There is something in every single living entity which is better than me. So realistically speaking, there is no one worse than me. Hare Krishna. And it is true. How could be any worse situation than to be in the material world and to be in the material body, and also identifying ourselves with the material body? There can be, there is nothing worse than that. But we can understand this only if we are realistic in our perceptions, which is happening by the mercy of Krishna, Guru and Vaishnavas. Thank you. Question, Mataji? Please take the microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, what is the mood of a devotee, of someone towards one who criticizes devotees?
What is the devotee's mood towards critics? Or someone who offends us, right?
No, not necessarily, just in general.
Oh. If someone is offending other devotees, it says that devotees should not tolerate. If someone is blaspheming other devotees, of course it's very interesting what Shastras recommend, that it says Shudra should commit suicide, Vaishya should take an excuse and leave the place, Kshatriya should kill the person,
What was the first one?
Shudra should commit suicide, Vaishya should, make an excuse and leave the place instead of hearing blasphemy. Kshatriya should kill such a person. But Brahmana should convince one with, good arguments to destroy one's offensive mentality. And so we can understand that if we are Vaishnavas, then we should be developing Brahminical culture and try to convince the offender that he is doing very dangerous things. Of course, for that one has to be very expert and has to have trustworthy relationship, that the person or the offender should be open to the idea of changing his or her mind. But if that kind of expertise and trust is not there, then we can just leave that association. That Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, even if someone is a Vaishnava but has bad character, that person should be avoided. And if someone is blasphemous or critical, then if we cannot help that person to change his or her mentality, the best thing is to avoid such an association altogether. And maybe let someone who can help them.
Because often somebody like that, it's not that they're a wholly bad person. It's not that they're always just, all of them is bad, 100% bad. So you were saying that a Vaishnava always sees the good in somebody. So does a devotee try and seek to see the good in such a person?
Yes, of course, we see that even if someone is critical and blasphemous, he is still a spirit soul and he is still a devotee, but bewildered by the influence of material energy. And if we can help, we should help. If we cannot help, we can find someone who can help. But the best thing is to help one to have a reality check. It is very effective most of the time to ask such a person, just in case if you run into such a situation that someone is criticizing some other Vaishnavas, etc. you can ask very simple question. What are you planning to do? What is your plan? Right? Because many times those people, they don't plan to do anything. What should be done? You can ask this person, what should be done? Okay, maybe complain to someone. Okay, then, there is no point of talking to me. Go and talk to someone who can make a difference, right? Etc. Of course, there are some devotees who have an argument that, I've tried to talk to everybody and nobody wants to do anything, so I'll be just broadcasting the fault of this devotee, and unfortunately it does happen. But then you can ask him, so does it help you to become happy in Krishna consciousness? Right? Because this is the goal. Why did we join this movement? Because we wanted to be happy in Krishna consciousness. And so, does this attitude or mentality helps you to become happy in Krishna consciousness? Is it helping you to chant your japa attentively? Is it making you very enthusiastic to rise for Mangalartik and run and see the deities and serve the deities, etc.? Does it make you blissful to see all the Vaishnavas? Of course not. So we can ask this person few questions which will hopefully make him or her thoughtful about, whether this is the right path. Anyone else? Yes, please take microphone. Can you pass the microphone over to Brahma?
Thank you, Maharaj. I was hearing about Shishupal thinking of Krishna and envy, and also I also heard about the churning, that some negative thoughts may come while practice of bhakti.
Yes.
So today I was unexpectedly having some negative thought, and I felt that, Krishna is supreme, he could have had a better situation for me in some respect, I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, say, health or something, so I was just like, but then I thought, why I'm having this negative thought, and then I couldn't decide that what should I do. I didn't want to have negative thought, but I felt that he is the supreme, so I couldn't do something better. And then I thought that pure devotees, they have much bigger problems than I was not sure what to do.
Yes. Therefore it says that many people want to serve the Lord, but only in advisory capacity. Right? If Krishna is the Supreme, then he should be doing this and this and that. Right? We know better than Krishna how to run this material world. Of course, this is why we came to the material world, to try to be Krishna. So, if we realize that we are not God, at least we can try to become God's direct advisors. But somehow Krishna is not always listening to our advisors. Right? Yes, we can have these kind of thoughts, which are clearly not very Krishna conscious thoughts. But luckily, and this may sound very surprising, luckily we're living in this wonderful age which is called Kali Yuga. And the wonder of Kali Yuga is that if you have any wrong thought, any bad thought, you don't get any reaction for the thought. It's only when this thought is translated into words and actions, only then you will have reaction. But any kind of wrong thoughts, bear no consequences. But in previous ages, even people were suffering even as a result of wrong thoughts. So we are lucky that Lord is not giving us any reactions for any wrong thoughts. So as long as we realize that, it's not a problem. Hare Krishna. Okay, I guess it should be the last question because we are running out of time.
Yeah, I was always very hopeful as this feature of Kali Yuga. But recently first kind of wake-up call was when I read in Harinama Chintamani about committing sinful activities on the strength of the holy name. And Haridas Thakur said that just thinking of committing sinful activity on the strength of the holy name is punishable by Yamaraj. And he said, what to say if you do that? So I was like, okay, he's speaking it in Kali Yuga, so it seems to be... And that's what, only towards this offense, and then we had a kind of association with Naragopal Prabhu last week, and he was telling that actually sins committed in the mind are not counted, but aparadhas committed in the mind. And he gave interesting categorization. Aparadha means towards Vaishnavas, towards the Lord, towards Dham, and towards the name. He said when you commit that is punishable. And I didn't ask him for the reference, but I saw that at least in one instance I saw the reference myself, at least to committing sins on the strength of the holy name. So it seems to be, it's hopeful but not too hopeful, It's better we don't commit aparadhas as much as possible. Of course, at least we need to stop ourselves as soon as possible, looks like.
Well, the danger of offensive thinking is that if we will not stop, then it will turn into words and actions. That's why, yes, of course, we need to control our minds. That's why mantra is meant for purifying our mind from any materialistic thoughts and filling it with Krishna conscious thoughts. All right, so thank you all very much for your kind of...
As long as the tendency is there, it's never enough. Thank you very much. So, Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj ki. So we'll have a little kirtan, and we will also have some Akadashi Prasadam coming at 4:30 of, India time is a little bit stretchable. So, maybe. Okay.